Today, we're exploring a challenge that every IT leader faces in the age of AI. But in fact, that every IT leader faces since the dawn of IT. You have to protect the business while still pushing forward. And today we're with Stephane, who is Chief Information Officer at FLOA, to join us and talk about what it means to wear those two hats, the Guardian and the Innovator, and how his team at FLOA and BNP navigates those strict regulatory environments while still finding the space to drive value and innovate through AI initiatives. So we'll discuss about trust, about governance, about security, about transformation, but I think overall about the role of IT, which is constantly changing. So thanks for being with us, Stephane.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
So it could be a little bit overwhelming to wear two hats. Meaning, even myself, most of the time, like when I have a cap, I feel so sweaty in summer. So I'm never like, should I wear this cap that protects me from the sun, or actually wear no cap and feel free? So what is it to be like the guardian and the innovator at a banking institution these days? Like in the age of AI, how does it feel?
It's a difficult balance to find, to be very honest. On one hand, as you explained, being a guardian of technology, I would say specifically in a large banking institution like BNP Paribas, with a major bank, as you know, we have a lot of concerns to ensure that data privacy, compliance, image protection. There's a lot of concerns that we need to be respecting, and CIOs as guardians of technologies are accountable to make sure these technologies are protected. So on one hand, I have a responsibility to protect the bank against all these aspects. On the other hand, the technology also, you want to be a facilitator for the business. AI is exploding everywhere, like we all know. Experimentation by business lines are pretty much everywhere. It's extremely affordable and extremely easy to access. Any business lines can, on their own, subscribe to service with a SaaS, AI vendor, or experiment with Gen AI. So lots of opportunities to create what I call the shadow AI, which is one of the major problems for a CIO these days, is to control the shadow part of its IT. And the shadow AI is actually growing faster than the shadow IT itself. So again, it's about finding the balance, I think, and then not easy.
Yep. So yeah, indeed, shadow AI in itself is not a new concept because shadow IT has been existing for many years. But indeed, it feels like there is another layer to it. But it feels to me that it's potentially more of a problem than just shadow IT. What do you think about the category of risk associated with shadow AI?
The first risk is, I would say, data privacy, clearly. Because, when you talk about Copilot or ChatGPT, all those Gen AI solutions that are widespread in every organization, as you know, it really depends on the source of data you're being fed. And the source of data in a company is quite wide. Number one, you can have access to conversations that you don't necessarily want to exploit in your AI systems, documentation, whether it's internal within the company or external. There's a lot of data privacy issues, number one. Compliance also is another area where we have to be very careful as well. We are operating in a very regulated environment. Banking, insurance companies are heavily regulated, like other fields, of course, which basically means we need to be very careful about our usage, very careful about the solutions that we deploy, their hosting environment. There's a lot of solutions like that to be looked at. And I think the difference between shadow AI and shadow IT is the ease of accessibility by the business. In the past, you needed to deploy an IT solutions. You had to basically go through the IT. So we were aware of it. We were contributing, we were supporting, we were filtering as an IT guardian the deployment of the solution. With AI, it's less true. You can be quite autonomous as a business. So it's much easier to bypass the IT departments and IT controls on those aspects.
Okay, so you've got indeed data privacy, general compliance, a lack of a barrier. So maybe we could double click on each. When you think about data privacy and AI, I guess the easy way to think about it is that you want to make sure that you understand what type of data is sent over the wire or stored by external providers, I guess. So I guess one way to think about it is that ultimately, as a bank, do you think that you would end up one day to have everything internal on your own models to make sure that you solve it by having everything running into your premises or your VPC or whatever else to make sure you've got a clear understanding of the data parameter by design? Or do you think it's more of a trade-off because you will have a mix of vendors that host the data, that needs to get, that host the LLM, that host the vector stores or whatever else, that all around? What do you think being not the current state, because we know the current state is what it is, but like the end state?
I think the end state will go towards more of a centralized own environment, own LLMs. That's already the philosophy of many banks. SaaS solutions, if you want to deploy a SaaS solution in the bank, you have to go through a very heavy process to be validated, So tendency is more to deploy on-premise, whether it's on your own cloud, private cloud, or in a data center. But clearly, the push is to deploy everything on its own. So right now, the reaction to large banks on the IT side is let's block everything just in case. Because right now it's moving too fast. We haven't really thought about the solution. We haven't thought exactly about the flexibility. So by default, we block everything. Now, this position is very extreme, of course, and has a lot of impact on credibility and also on adoption and the ease of experimentation by business. And gradually, I expect these restrictions to be lifted, and we go back to a more stable version. But the first reactions to stop the hemorrhage, if you want, of risks is to control everything. But ultimately, I think it's going to be definitely trying to develop solutions which are inbound, completely encircled within the environment of the bank, at least to protect against the external access or external consumption of your data. But you also have problems that are privacy within the bank. For example, if you have access to HR information or access to some business sensitive information you don't want to share to your entire community of employees, those aspects remain even if you stay within the realm of the bank.
So there is one topic of like just that data security extended to the world of LLM and vector stores and this, and there is a topic of staying within the realm of the bank. But I guess in this world where you stay within the realm of the bank, you imagine that you start having more application provided by potentially third parties, but like running inside your VPC. Yes. And those applications, each of them end up using AI technologies, so using models. And so then it gets to the question of like, where are the GPUs or the way to run the models for all of those applications? And if you've got 15 of them, each of them have their own models, or like do they share it? What do you think? What do you think it looks like?
Ultimately, there would be some sharing of models, I believe, and the way they're going to run definitely on our infrastructure, whether it's on premise or on our own cloud. It doesn't necessarily have to be physical data centers, but definitely I think they will be hosted in the same environment. And but as far as the multiplicity of LLMs, we clearly, or models in general, we definitely are going, in my opinion, into a centralized model. But you have to be careful also, because when talk about the banks like the size of BNP, we're extremely large. So it could be within an entity of BNP, you're going to be on the same models, but you could definitely have multiple models coexisting within the group itself.
Yep.
I will give you, if you want, an example of those such restrictions. We have deployed Copilot at BNP. Microsoft Copilot, and one thing which is actually the most blocking factor that everybody hates right now is we are blocking transcripts in Teams. Transcripts in Teams are extremely helpful. Everybody wants transcripts.
They are.
And when you think of it, there's ways to bypass it in different ways. So, but by default, by principle, initially, before we go further, transcripts are being blocked and forbidden. And so we are to stop it until further notice, until analysis can be made, and until we decide finally that we can provide a safe usage of transcript. But this is an example of things which can be very, very annoying for the employees of the company working. And this is just an example.
Which I guess is potentially related to the second topic you mentioned, meaning the topic of compliance itself.
Yeah.
Meaning not just data privacy per se, but like compliance. And I guess this is a topic that is probably not so easy to understand by most, as in, what do we actually mean by compliance beyond the word compliance when we talk about AI application? Why do they create additional compliance risk? Compliance to what are we talking about?
Well, it's mostly, without getting into too many details, it's mostly about creating barriers between partners and customers that you are with. You want to make sure there is like silos, and information about a partner cannot be in some extent distributed to different groups. And when you're working in a bank and you have different teams working with different partners, team one who is working with partner one should not know about partner two, because they haven't been entitled, they haven't been authorized to access this information. So again, this is about sharing information which can be available to more than one, to a wider population than expected, and create some breach of compliance. That's the one.
It's like having the complete control of your flow of information, which makes sense. Meaning, the thing that we've seen, I think that exists in the, I would say, in the classic data world, is the fact that, meaning we've been working with various banks or investment banks. Indeed, you need to provide analytics or aggregates of the data or model in a very specific way, so that you can see only the data you can allow to see with a certain granularity, and another one with another level of granularity, and a third one with another level of granularity, with all combination depending on who can see what and compliance and stuff. Yeah. And so it's way complex as a security model than what people expect, in fact. It's and I guess what you're talking about, the equivalent of this, but like with documents and aggregate of information coming from LLM, which is like another model of things.
Yeah, and structured and unstructured. Documents is one thing. You can label, you can tag your documents. It's actually more difficult with emails and blogs and chats and everything, and conversations, and this information, which is the source of all the models, actually are so widespread and so hard to control and tag properly, that you expose yourself, and banks are not willing to take any risks. That's one thing banks are very risky by definition.
Makes sense. And your last point there was think about the difficulty to control new AI applications coming in, even compared to traditional SaaS applications. Can you elaborate on why? Because my own intuition is that for most interesting applications of AI, you still need to connect to some internal data. So in theory, the business needs to go through IT the same way in order to get value out of it. But
not necessarily. It is true at some point, you if you really want to have a model which is rich enough, you're gonna need to integrate with your production data. Therefore, you need to talk to IT to make sure that we're on board. But you can experiment very fast with a subset of information that you can maintain in some shadow IT also, like systems which are not exactly pure production data, but operate within the realm of department, but are not necessarily controlled by IT itself. So within your own department, sometimes as a business, you may have access to some data that actually can be sufficient to start the experimentation. We have a perfect example. We developed an intelligent assistant to process credit applications, and it's a vocal assistant. And the first version actually was developed totally without integration with any IT system that we control at IT, and done through integration of models and local databases and local systems owned by the department outside of our IT's jurisdiction, if you want. But as we start to develop and enrich the product and the model, now we need to integrate with IT. So of course, at some point, you need to suck in production data from our production database and all the things, and our customer in a custom database, in particular partner database. So at some point, it's you can definitely, you have no choice. But early experimentation can be run quite autonomously if you want.
Really?
That's another problem too, because it leads to a lot of potential duplications. We see departments not talking to each other and running exactly the same thing with different solutions, and wasting a lot of cycles in that.
Yeah, which is one of my questions related to how you think about when thinking about like adoption of AI and helping the company doing more with AI, or you think about your AI management of your AI portfolio. Because you end up having in this portfolio applications of AI that are very different in nature, meaning the transcript capability on Teams meeting is one type of application of AI, call it an agent or not, whatever. Whereas facilitating a conversation with a customer, lending to a loan or something like this, it seems to be a way more core type of process, core application within the bank. And so it seems that it's comparing apple to bananas, or even maybe apple to elephant, in terms of what type of objects we're talking about and their impact.
Well, You're right. I mean, there are definitely a lot of business-facing applications, and we have many in customer relations, for example, which is a very high potential field for deploying assistance. Whether it's to support the an entry in the relationship of a client or a partner, whether it's to address complaints or customer support issues, assistance can really flourish in this environment quite easily. And yes, they're core, but they're also core within a subset of the bank, which is really the customer relationship domain, which by definition already has its own set of tools and operates in semi-autonomy. And then you have indeed the solutions, the AI solutions that are basically more cross-border and cross-department, like everything tied into the IT workplace. Everything is Copilot, for example. All the usage of Copilots are in that category. Or even internal assistants, you can have like an help desk support from IT to the rest of your departments. So you do have those two communities, but in any case, you still need to maintain a common governance. And one of the things we're working on at the moment to start to regain control on all these deployments and all this spread out of technology or AI technology is to try to build like a centralized oversight governance. And with the right members, the representative, of course, of the business lines, representative of the legal departments, compliance departments, and IT, in order to revisit all the usages and being able to filter those that we want to allow and those we want to control.
And I guess so when enters the topic of governance, there's probably immediately the topic of like tiering of those applications. And I guess this tiering can be either from a risk and compliance basis, meaning does this technology introduce interestingly lots of risk of non-compliance versus fewer, depending on what it does. But there is another axis, which is, I would say, the impact on the business. Or is it core to the business? And where is it like just a tool that everybody can use for general productivity? Or is it something that is kind of like linked to the business model of the bank? And so, what do you think about those applications?
The oversight is actually is two different processes in my mind, two different steps. The first step is the business validation. Is this the right tool? Is it something that we want to do as a bank? Is it compliant to our strategy? Is it going to bring value? What is the ROI? Obviously, we invest money to develop solutions, and what kind of ROI can we get from that? So that's the first step, which is addressed in our bank, and I'm sure in other institutions as well, through what we call a roadmap authority in FLOA, which is basically, do you want to go or not go with that solution? So that's number one. So first step is you validate that the solution is a good solution for your company and something that is consistent with strategy and allows you to make money out of it. The second one is once you have that, what are there any compliance, security risks or data privacy risks that you want to examine? And those two committees, those two governance layers can happen to concurrently at the same time or be spread out, but they're really different audience, different drivers as well. But both are necessary in order to start the process and initiate an experimentation.
Yeah. And I guess when talking about those innovation, you also end up having, meaning I guess you have at some point a vision where you've got like a multiplicity of new type of AI applications that are potentially connected to one another, or like some form of ecosystem, which is you can create tools or agents and so forth, or not. Like at some point, do you also need to think about the architecture of all of this, the notion of like orchestration of all of those agents together? Is there a new way to think about IT instead of like just applications, but like something else?
Yeah,
that is almost a new concept from an IT perspective?
Yes, to be honest, right now we're not at a stage where we have interconnected AI systems talking to each other because we're still, I would say an early stage of deploying AI at FLOA right now. But if I project myself, within the next year or two, I clearly envision that in order to build something that is actually coherent and also respecting our architectural guideline principles, we need to start to build this common architecture and leverage the resources we have, IT resources we have, the computing resources we have as well, and the reuse of the various models we can use. So we need to engage into that step. We haven't reached that level yet, FLOA, but this is definitely something we need to do at some point.
Right. But yeah, I guess indeed today it's more agent, and I guess one aspect you might see is AI used by IT itself to drive innovation and actually to drive efficiency in IT of others through use of AI. I guess it could be a very strong driver of innovation today.
Yes, and it's extremely important, and we are gradually embarking into that avenue in the IT side. So initially, if you look at the genesis of AI at FLOA, it was very much driven by the business for various reasons, mostly lack of time on IT. We're engaged into a major transformation project that really was consuming all of our bandwidth. So initially, a lot of experimentation done by the business, and IT was more in a support role, and then gradually into a governance and oversight controlling role, which is not the best role to have, to be honest, and we talked about that. But now we're getting into a stage where we want to use AI for IT, and we are launching basically two massive initiatives right now related to AI for IT. The first one is trying to combine RPA with agentic AI. This is one area where we see a lot of potential. We're starting to really experiment. We're using a lot of RPA in the bank because there's a lot of manual process, which process tons of data in a repetitive manner. So we all know the RPA at its own limitations. It's as good as a process. If the process change, what decision needs to be made. RPA is a good tool for you. But if you combine agentic and RPA, and with the vendor that is working with us on the RPA side, we have a lot of solutions. So we are starting to experiment on that side. So this is extremely promising. We see a lot of opportunities on that. The second opportunity is basically AI for our development team. Very classically, we're starting to experiment as well with code generation and allowing us to benefit from code quality and of course productivity. Mostly code quality, I think it's the main driver I'm looking at right now. Another one is also automatic testing, being able to analyze code and improve your test coverage out of that by generating test cases on the code you generate. And third one is documentation, being able to benefit from an always fresh set of documents and up-to-date documentation on your code. So these are three axes which we will start investigating heavily starting the fall. And the fourth one is in the area of infrastructure monitoring. Again, we're working with one of our monitoring vendor who has Kiri solutions, and they have AI components as well to do prediction of anomalies, to do detection of anomalies, to do also analysis of incidents that you have. So all the predictability of an incident and the handling of an incident can be heavily helped by the introduction of AI. So the other four axes that we are working on, or we plan to work on in the next few months, in addition to the RPA AI solutions.
Okay. And does it change the way you think about building new applications or extending existing applications? And what I mean, maybe to make my question more specific, I think that many build of applications or extension of existing business application is about helping to support a specific workflow in the organization, where you need to ask person A for this, person B, if this is happening, you should call the system to update this record and send a notification of progress and then end at the end somewhere. Well, that's a workflow. There is the view that to some extent you could have some of those workflows being reimaginated as an agent, where it's more like literally as it like there was a little someone going from one office to the other, one desk to the other, and asking the person around. And if the answer is not correct right away, they're like, oh, you should have actually entered this information, which is inconsistent. Can you repeat, please? And like doing and supporting processes and workflows actually differently, which is not something I've seen that much yet. But do you think it's a new way to think about your application landscape, like those workflow type of landscape?
Absolutely. I mean, clearly there's lots of opportunities to do exactly what you described. And that is why we are exploring with this RPA/agentic solutions with our vendor, because I feel like in the next few years, we'll have less and less traditional code and more processes which will be handled enormously with agents, with potentially, again, some RPA help to automate some very repetitive, very straightforward and well-defined portions of things, because those tools are extremely efficient. So you want to combine those stuff. So I can see workflows which are partly covered by RPA for the heavily static, repetitive part of the process, agents that actually will make decisions based on rules that can be built, and third layer being the human intervention to validate, to to stamp some decisions or correct or make decisions that the agent cannot take autonomously. So those three together, the RPA, the agents, and the human together, I believe will replace a big chunk of the traditional software that is usually built and written traditionally, I would say. So less and less coding and more combination of solutions.
Yeah. And do you have an intuition of like where do all of those agents live, or if they live anywhere? Well, I do know they're not alive, but like how do you think they're being run?
Well, they will live in our cloud, that's for sure. That's already a little bit efficient. So they will live in our own cloud, in our own environment for sure. Again, that depending what you meant in terms of on the hosting side, your question related to hosting or?
No, I mean, I guess that there is like, you have like a variety of frameworks to create agents, and you can use as a starting point the framework of an existing business application. You can think about it as just extension of RPA for everything. You can like, you have like many different starting points. And so there's a question of like, do you think that depending on the type of agent, you end up having different starting points and actually multiple type of agent with different agentic gravity depending on like the ecosystem you're talking about and the type of task you're talking about? Or do you think there will be like a meta management of agent or a meta runtime in one central location so that you've got a nice dashboard of
that would be great to get to that point. I don't think right now it's a bit early for me to say, but clearly right now I envision those agents to be more extension of RPA and running, and they may be interconnected as well. I mean, there's a lot of interconnection of processes through this chain. Ultimately, there's one thing that we have in mind as well, but I think it's a bit early to address it right now. It's the AI monitoring of AI. What Gartner refers to as a TRISM, trust, risk, and support and risk management and security management. Being able to have not only your AI network of agents working together in a coordinated ways, but also having a meta layer of agents monitoring that your AI, and back to the governance, back to the oversight, is also performing in a compliant way in terms of data privacy and others. So a monitoring of AI by AI agents, which would be the cherry on the cake.
Yeah, but like if you dig to some of the specific compliance within every process require to highlight certain steps that are the one where you make a decision and where you explain and trace back why this decision was taken and when it was wrong or not, and like you've got some. And so there's a question of like, indeed, where do you build this type of muscle? Because it's beyond guardrails by far. It's not just about it's about the process itself, which is, of course, it's a good question from your perspective. How much this can be owned by IT versus owned by the business? So like, what is the boundary if you end up having this type of meta system for managing AI?
I believe the meta system, because you also want to leverage common capabilities for logging and tracing of activities, and that ties up to the governance that you want to put in place. Yeah. So this to me is something which would be centralized. Now, ideally speaking, we want this layer of oversight, technical oversight, and right traceability and others to be run on top of the business layer and leave as much freedom for the businesses to develop their own applications, but with an integration to this layer. It's like having libraries of logs that you want to embed into every business application. It's about the same principle. You want to create those like libraries of monitoring layers that you need to embed into your business applications and respect.
Yep. Which leads me to another question. There is a question of like, who is building and maintaining those systems? Because let's say, you could make the point that when you're talking and when we're talking about the automation of, I would say, sometimes more granular processes, it's indeed more robotic process automation as a starting point on one end of the spectrum. And on the other end of the spectrum, when you're talking about more core business process, meaning ultimately the question is like, what is the data you're using or not? What are the hypotheses? Who is making the decision for it? What are the steps? What are the stakeholders? Which is less about the connection of the systems together, but more about the translation of the existing business process itself. And so in that case, do you think that it's mostly the business that needs to be able to build the app? Or do you think that IT needs to transform in order to actually be that business translator too?
No, I think the business should ultimately build the app themselves. I think nowadays, you have ways to do specifications, and that actually could translate directly into code. At the end, the final link of the implementations will probably have to be done by either a technical partner of the business or by IT, depending on your model. But the business should be as much as possible in control of the processes and the workflows they want to implement, and also responsible for the compliance aspects. IT should not be responsible for the compliance of an application to the regulation. This is a business responsibility. This is true today, and this will be true tomorrow as well. We're here to control. We're not here to necessarily replace business on the responsibilities of ensuring compliance, for example.
What makes sense. And maybe to go toward a bit of a wrap up. When you think about all of those things together, ultimately the question is like, what is the goal? Meaning, what is the goal? Of course, innovation. Every of those innovation individually is great. Meaning I see all of those potential in AI, but I'm curious to how you think about it at the overarching goal for IT. Meaning, what do you think it changed down 2 or 3 years down the line? Is there any simple way to think about it in terms of like incremental efficiencies or new things being unlocked, or is it too early to tell anyway?
No, I think the objectives are the same objectives we always had in IT, which is time to market. If you can develop solutions faster because they rely on out-of-the-shelf solutions and are basically require less productivity of coding or development can be improved, that's definitely one objective. The second one, which is very important, is quality. Reducing the amount of bugs you have in software by having either code that is generated by an agent, or by having testing or better documentation to prevent upfront design flaws and those kind of things. So the quality, increasing quality and reducing the defects are definitely a second very big objective. The third one is reactivity and stability. And I'm referring more to what we want to do on the infrastructure side, being able to anticipate outages before they happen, and be able to detect and resolve problem or self-heal or IT systems as well autonomously is a big, so it's time to repair is the third one. So again, time to market, time to repair, and anticipation and prevention of anomalies and outages, and quality are the three main drivers that we're looking at from IT perspective. When you think of it, this was true 10 years ago, 20 years ago as well, but we had different techniques. And we had, mostly we relied on people and competent people to address that. And later on, we relied on tools that helped us to do monitoring and help us to do automatic testing and those kind of things. And nowadays, I think AI is giving you another set of capabilities to go many steps beyond and improve and enrich to this level of satisfaction for our business.
Makes sense. It's indeed very similar in some ways, but I think in other ways the role of the IT leader and like what makes a great IT leader must have changed in the last few years, or like what needs to be a great IT leader now for the future must be also changing. Like, what's your perspective on that? What makes an IT leader great these days?
What's more difficult right now is the speed at which the innovation goes, and always in the catch-up mode. And AI was a very good example. If you're not cautious at really be on top of all innovations and everything, and dedicate a lot of effort and resources, bandwidth to stay up to date, to experiment on your own, to do things on your own, departments, businesses are going to catch up much faster than you, because they are very focused. They have more resources in some areas to experiment on the business side, and they can go very fast. And then you end up playing catch-up mode and trying to say, okay, what's going on, and how can I control it? And the way you're going to control it can be quite stupid sometimes. In the first reaction, you say, let's block it until I understand better, and then gradually you give more freedom and more flexibility. So it's really a speed and maintaining your edge on the technology, so you can be not only the guardian of technology, but you can also be the incubator of technology, and that takes time, that takes resources as well, and dedicated resources to address those fields. That's what we're trying to do now in FLOA as a result of the last year. But the last 2 years we were really much in catch-up mode, and we're trying to overcome this limitation right now.
Do you have any other thoughts or excitement about the future this future of AI?
Many thoughts. Well, obviously, we want to look at measuring the benefits we're trying to reap out of this AI for IT that I discussed. All these automatic code generations, RP, agentic. Right now, we have a lot of hype around that. We think intuitively that this can help us a lot, but we haven't seen the results. So my first objective is let's see if there's what this pudding can give us in a way, and then also is trying to be able to find the right balance of collaboration between the business and IT. This relationship is changing, as I said. We used to be the provider of solutions, technology solutions for the business, and now we become a partner more than a provider directly. So it's a different model, and yes, there is governance aspect. There is also a consulting and advising aspect that we need to have. Our role in IT needs to change and be more of an advisor than not only a provider of solutions and the problems faced by the market, by the business.
Makes sense. Makes a ton of sense. Well, thanks a lot, Stephane, for all of those words of wisdom and for sharing them with us. It was a pleasure to spend this time with you.
Thank you, Florian. It was a pleasure also. Bye.